Hello YouTubers. I'm trying something that I've not tried before, but it follows on from the update that I did earlier this week with my cuirassiers. A couple of people had asked about the technique that I use for the oil wipe-off painting method, so I thought I'd give you or try and give you a demo of how I do it. We'll see how it turns out anyway. What I'm doing now is I've put a small amount of Winsor & Newton paint. In this case it's this one here, Burnt Umber. Hold it the right way around so you can see it for a start. Small blob of that, and then I've added in some of the liquid stuff that I use. Basically blob it on the end of the brush and then mix it in. Try not to get it too runny, because I want to get a reasonably thick consistency for when I do the horse. So what I'll do is I'll just try doing one horse and we'll see how it goes. So I've already undercoated the horse in black, which was sprayed on. Then I used Humbrol enamels, matte enamel, to do the body work, as it were, and now it's ready for the wipe off. So it's really a question of just daubing the oil paint on. Don't have to be too gentle about it, really. Just get plenty of coverage. I'm dipping it in around the detailed parts at this stage, so I don't want to spoil those I've already done. But I figured that it was easier to do it this way, that is to say, paint the horse blanket and then the body of the horse, because I can always touch up the blanket later on if needs be, and it looks like it might be fairly easy to get round the blanket without making too much of a mess of things. So plenty of paint, plenty of daubing. I'm using a Pro Art size 6 brush. It's a synthetic brush. It's not sable. I've actually got some sable brushes, but I tend to use those for more detail work. So if I can just bring it a bit closer, you can see what's going on, hopefully. So I put plenty of paint on, and make sure that it gets worked into all the various crevices and parts, the underside and so forth. It's not, as I said, it's not that accurate underneath and whatnot, because you're going to be touching in, or I'm going to be touching in the straps and the leather work later on. So really, this is a matter of just getting this oil coat on so that I can get to the base colour of the horse. Got to the edge a little bit there, but that doesn't matter too much. And then when you come to the head and mane and so forth, again, can daub plenty on, down the edges here. I'm sorry if you can hear some disturbing noises, but I've just had my lunch. So I apologise. Right, so I think that's pretty much everything. I'm not bothering too much about the mane, because I'm going to do the mane black anyway, or certainly darken it down when it's finished. But I think that hopefully gives you an idea. Let me shift this out of the way. That gives you an idea of what it looks like with the first coat of the oil paint on. Now I won't start wiping that off straight away. I'll leave it for a while. So we'll put him out of the way. And I'll try another figure I don't want to bore you, but I suppose it's worthwhile if I show you the technique twice, then it might be worth saving for future reference. This technique is not one I invented. Many years ago, in the early 70s in fact, about 73, 74, something like that, I discovered that there was a war game show at the local civic hall where I lived at that time, or near where I lived, a place called Swinton, just outside Manchester. And there was a guy there. It was the first war game show I'd ever been to. It was in the days when Northern Militaire was really quite a show. And I went down there one Saturday on spec, and there was a chap whose name I can't now remember, giving painting demonstrations, and I think he was something to do with the late Peter Gilder, or that wasn't Peter Gilder, it was somebody else. But this chap showed the technique of putting on the oil paint and then wiping it off. I remember specifically because he said that the piece of cloth he'd got was a section of an old dress of his wife's that he'd cut up. I assume it was an old one, and she did agree to that. But anyway, he'd got this section of her dress, cotton dress I think it was, and the importance of it was that it was cotton and it didn't have any lint on it. It wasn't nylon, that would have been no good. But it was cotton, didn't have any lint on it, and so it was able to absorb some of the moisture, the oil, from the paint, and more particularly it was able to absorb the white spirit, because at that point he was actually diluting the paint with white spirit. I think Peter Gilder did have a method of his own where what he would do is he would paint a horse white. Excuse me, just concentrate on that. He'd paint a horse white, then he'd paint it with enamels, and then he'd put white spirit on it and rub the enamels off to give a lighter colour underneath, which is similar to the oil technique basically, but this guy was using the oils anyway, and he showed me how to do that, and I've been doing it ever since. My first efforts were pathetic. I put far too much paint on, and I was a bit miffed, to say the least, when sort of 3 days later I'd come back and the damn figure still wasn't dry. So I obviously got the mix wrong. And then I read about Liquin, I can't remember where it was, and I thought, now that could well do the job. And indeed, I've used Liquin ever since, and it does dry it an awful lot quicker. So that's two done. I'm not going to bore you by letting you sit there and watch me paint a load of horses. So what I'll do is I'll do a few more horses. It'll give these that I've done a chance to dry off a bit, and then I'll come back to you and we'll see about the wipe off technique. Okay, it's about hour and a half, 2 hours since I finished painting all these bods with the oil paints, so now I think it's probably about time to have a go at the wipe off. I mentioned in the outset, I think it was on the video I did the other day, that I was actually using makeup pads that I'd cut up. Actually, my wife's got me these things, the little sort of triangles from the makeup counter. Advantage of these is, of course, they've got quite pointy edges, so when you do come to wipe off, you can get into crevices a little bit better with them. So I'll just zoom in a wee bit for you. Hope that's about right, and then give you an idea of what's involved. So it's a matter of just going over gently and taking off a layer of paint, wherever you want to highlight it. I tend to leave underneath the horse because it's going to be in shadow anyway, and this is the crucial part here, I think, around the rump, and that needs lightening up quite a bit. You don't need to go too heavy. As you can see, the oil comes off all over this thing. You can use the other end when you need to, and if you take too much off, you can always put some more paint back on again, because the oil paint proper hasn't dried yet. How much you want to take off, a matter of personal choice really. You can use a dab as well, you don't have to just wipe it off. I'm looking for a medium brown to dark brown for these Cuirassier figures, because I think they'd probably be on fairly dark horses. So that's the sort of effect that I was looking for. See close up, it actually looks a bit yucky close up, but on the actual War Games board, when you get them down and finish them off, they actually look quite attractive. I think so anyway. It's a matter of personal choice at the end of the day. What I'd do with this one now is I would go over him, just pull out about a bit. I'd go over the horse when it's dry, and darken in the mane, and do the feet, or the hooves rather, socks. I know absolutely nothing about horses other than the fact they've got 4 legs. Colours and so forth are a complete mystery to me. I just do what I think looks nice. What I've done with this one, this is from the batch I did at the outset, and the colour I used was the burnt umber colour from Winsor & Newton. That's for this crowd here, which I'll just show you. That's these. The other horses over the end here, I did using Winsor & Newton, but this one is the Van Dyke Brown. And these 2 horses here, I think he's umber again. This one I know I was using up the rest of my paint, so I did him with a mixture of Van Dyke Brown and umber. That, I hope, gives you an idea of how to do this technique. You can carry on for as long as you like, really, until you get sort of the effect you want. If you want to make a really pale horse, then you just keep going. As I said though earlier, I know nothing about horses. There's a bit there which will need touching up for his mane. These are European horses. I presume that you could use the same technique for horses of the American plains, but certainly the plain ones, the patchy horses, such as worn by the, well, according to the pictures I've seen, ridden by the Red Indian tribes and so forth. Palominos, I think they are, I don't know. The patchy horses, anyway, let's call them that. Excuse my ignorance if you're an equine fan, but anyway, don't think you can really do that with it, because you've got the black patches and the white patches and so forth. I'll do another one. I'll tell you what I'll do this time is I'll do this herald, or the trumpeter. I don't know when it became the tradition for trumpeters to be mounted on grey horses. I know that certainly in the Napoleonic period that would seem to be the case. I don't know when it became common for that to be done. This trumpeter is not riding a grey horse. Actually, I think I'm really crap at painting grey horses. I haven't tried to paint a grey horse for absolutely ages. I tried years ago and it turned out awful. I really ought to get the courage to do a grey one, because I am actually doing Napoleonics. And so, I just realised you can't see what I'm doing because I'm blotting the camera out. But when I do the Napoleonics, I will need to do some grey horses. So I'll have to look into that. But for the moment, I'm not using grey. Now, when it gets really mucky like that, what you can do is you can cut. What I was saying was, before I knocked the camera over, when the sponge gets really mucky, you can actually just pull it in half or snip it in half, and you're back going again. But for what they cost, you may as well use a new one. You get loads in a bag. What I'll do is I'll put a list of the materials that I've used on the introduction to the video, or on the description of the video, so that you'll get a better idea of exactly what it is that I've used to achieve this. So that's it, really. Not really particularly complicated. I hope it's been of some assistance. I'll mention at the end anyway, when I finish the actual unit, I'll show you them then in a separate video, but just in case I forget to mention it then, what I do when the horses are finished is I varnish them in a satin varnish. The rider and the horse blanket, so forth, I would varnish in matte, because I prefer a matte finish. But the actual horse itself, I will varnish that in a satin varnish, because I find that's it just gives a better effect, I think, really. And I think that's about everything that I can tell you associated with painting horses of this kind, in this way anyway. Hope it's been of interest to you. If you like it, please click the button. If there's anything you want to ask me, or anything which you think needs further explanation, then please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. And that's it for the time being, so I'll see you soon. Cheers for now.